Can you believe she actually wore those boots? The voice floated over the hedge of hydrangeas I was pruning. It was high, sharp, and dripping with disdain. I froze, my shears hovering over a dead bloom. I knew that voice. It belonged to Tiffany, my daughter-in-law of 2 years. The woman my son David had married in a whirlwind romance that left me breathless and, frankly, suspicious. I know, right? A second voice chimed in. One of her influencer friends. Does she not know this is a launch party? It's about aesthetics, Tiff. Having an old woman in muddy overalls wandering around. It ruins the vibe. Don't worry, Tiffany laughed. The sound like breaking glass. I told David to handle it. After tonight, she's going to the guest cottage. Permanently. We need the master suite for the new studio anyway. I lowered the shears, my hands stained with the rich, dark soil of the estate I had built, with my own sweat and blood for 40 years, were trembling. Not with age, with rage. My name is Eleanor. To Tiffany and her legion of online followers, I am just Grandma Ellie, the eccentric, dirt-stained nuisance who came with the house. The quiet widow who spends her days tending the roses and stays out of the way. What they don't know, what even my son seems to have forgotten, is that I am Eleanor Vance, the Eleanor Vance, the landscape architect who designed the botanical gardens in Kyoto, the restoration of the Versailles Orangery, and the private estates of 3 monarchs. This house, this sprawling 10-acre estate with its cascading fountains and rare orchid collection, it wasn't an inheritance David stumbled upon. It was my masterpiece, my sanctuary. And tonight, at the launch party for Tiffany's nature-inspired lifestyle brand, a brand built entirely on photos of my gardens, she was planning to evict me, to banish me to the guest cottage, which was really just the converted potting shed. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of damp earth and jasmine. I wiped my hands on my overalls. So I whispered to the hydrangeas, she wants to play with dirt. Let's see how she likes getting buried in it. The party was in full swing by sunset. String lights, which Tiffany had insisted on draping over my prize-winning wisteria, damaging the vines I might add, twinkled in the twilight. Waiters in white tuxedos circulated, with trays of vegan hors d'oeuvres that looked like birdseed. I walked onto the main terrace. I hadn't changed. I was still wearing my work boots, my canvas overalls, and my sun hat. I carried a basket of freshly cut peonies, the specific variety Tiffany had demanded for her centerpieces. Tiffany saw me instantly. She was standing by the champagne tower, wearing a silk dress that cost more than my first car. Her eyes widened in horror. She marched over to me, her smile tight and fake, for the benefit of the guests. Eleanor, she hissed through her teeth. What are you doing here? I told David to keep you in the back. The flowers, I said, holding up the basket. You said you needed the Sarah Bernhardt peonies for the main table. I needed them an hour ago, she snapped, snatching the basket. She shoved it into the arms of a passing waiter. Look at you, you're filthy. There are investors here, Eleanor. People from Vogue Living, you look like. The help. I am the help, I said calmly. Who do you think keeps the aphids off your roses? Shua, she looked around frantically. Go now. Before someone takes a picture. You are ruining my brand. Your brand, I asked. You mean the brand based on the secret garden you claim to have cultivated yourself? Tiffany's eyes narrowed. It is my garden. David inherited this place. That makes it ours. And since I'm the one monetizing it, I'm the one who decides who gets to be seen in it. Now get out, go to the cottage and stay there until tomorrow. She turned her back on me, dismissed me, like a servant who had dropped a tray. I stood there for a moment, watching her glide back to her guests, laughing, touching arms, claiming credit for the beauty surrounding her. She pointed to the koi pond, my design from 1998, and explained how she had selected the stones for their energy. I saw David across the lawn, my son. He was holding a drink, looking uncomfortable in a linen suit. He saw me. He saw Tiffany yell at me, and he did nothing. He looked down at his shoes. That hurt more than Tiffany's words. That broke something inside me that I didn't think could be broken. I turned and walked away, but I didn't go to the cottage. I went to the library. The library was my office. It was where I kept my drafting tables, my awards, and most importantly, the safe. Tiffany rarely came in here. She said it smelled like old paper and wasn't aesthetic enough for her videos. I closed the heavy oak door and locked it. I went to the painting of the English countryside hanging above the fireplace, a gift from the Duke of Devonshire, and swung it aside. I dialed the combination. Click. I pulled out a thick leather portfolio. Inside were the deeds, the copyright registrations for my designs, the bank statements showing the trust fund I controlled, and the lease agreement I had drawn up when David moved back in 3 years ago, a document he had signed without reading, thinking it was just a formality for the insurance. I sat at my desk. I turned on the banker's lamp. I wasn't the gardener anymore. I was the architect, and I was about to redesign my son's life. I waited until 9 p.m. That was when Tiffany was scheduled to make her big speech, the reveal of her new product line. I could hear the music swell outside. I picked up the portfolio. I took off my sun hat. I didn't change my clothes. My dirt-stained overalls were my armor. My boots were my weapons. I walked back out to the terrace. Tiffany was on a small stage they had erected over my herb garden. She held a microphone. A spotlight hit her, making her glow like an angel. A false angel. "Thank you all for coming," she cooed. "When David and I took over this estate, it was a ruin. A wild, overgrown mess. A lie, it was immaculate. I poured my soul into restoring it," she continued. "I spent days on my hands and knees, communing with the earth, designing every pathway, every flower bed you see tonight." The crowd applauded. "Bravo," someone shouted. And that is why, Tiffany beamed, I am so proud to launch the Tiffany Garden Collection. Seeds, tools, and plans. All designed by me. She gestured to a large easel, covered in a velvet cloth. And now the centerpiece of the collection. The blueprints for this very garden, available for you to buy. She pulled the cloth. Underneath was a blown-up image of a landscape drawing. My drawing. I gasped. I recognized it instantly. It was a sketch I had done in 1985. It was dated, it was signed. But she had photoshopped her signature over mine. A clumsy digital smudge. That was it. Theft of property was one thing. Theft of art, that was war. I walked up the steps of the stage. The heavy thud of my boots on the wood echoed through the microphone stand. Tiffany spun around. "What are you, security?" There was no security, only the hired bartenders who looked confused. "I think," I said, leaning into the microphone, my voice booming across the lawn. "There has been a slight misunderstanding." The feedback whined. The guests gasped. A woman in overalls crashing the stage, it was a scandal. "Eleanor, get down," David hissed from the front row. He started to rush the stage. "Stay where you are, David," I commanded. It was the voice I used to direct cranes and bulldozers. He froze. I looked at the crowd. I saw the confusion, the judgment. And then I saw a face I recognized. Sitting in the VIP section was Marcus Thorne, the editor of Landscape Architecture Weekly. He was squinting at me. "Tiffany says she designed this garden," I said, gesturing to the easel. "She says she restored this estate from a ruin." "I did," Tiffany shrieked, trying to grab the mic. I held it out of reach. "I am 68, but I haul 50-pound bags of mulch daily. She goes to Pilates," I won. "She says this is her legacy," I continued. "But I have a question for the designer. Tiffany, what is the pH balance required for those blue hydrangeas you love so much?" Tiffany blinked. "What? It's blue. Just blue." "Acidic," I said. 5.5 or lower. If the soil is alkaline, they turn pink. Basic chemistry." I turned to the drawing. "And this sketch, the one you sell, is yours. Why is the north arrow pointing towards the conservatory?" "Because that's where north is," she stammered. "No," I said. "North is towards the stables." In 1985, when I drew this, the conservatory was planned for the south lawn, to maximize winter sun. I changed it in the final build. Only the original architect would know that. Original architect. A murmur went through the crowd. Marcus Thorne stood up. He walked to the stage, peering up at me. His eyes went wide. "Eleanor," he whispered. "Eleanor Vance." "Hello, Marcus," I smiled. "It's been a while. Since the Chelsea Flower Show, I believe." "My God," Marcus turned to the crowd. "Do you people know who this is? This is the woman who designed the Royal Gardens. This is a legend." Tiffany looked like she had swallowed a lemon. She's just David's mom. She lives in the shed." "I live in the master suite," I corrected her. "Or I did, until you decided to turn it into a content studio." I opened the leather portfolio. I pulled out the deed. I held it up to the spotlight. "This is the deed to 420 Highgarden Lane," I announced. "It lists the owner as Eleanor Vance. Not David Vance. And certainly not Tiffany Vance." I pulled out another paper. "And this," I waved it, "is the caretaker agreement my son signed 3 years ago. It states that he and his guests are allowed to reside on the property in exchange for," and I quote, "maintenance of the grounds and respect for the integrity of the design." I looked at Tiffany. "You wrapped Christmas lights around a 100-year-old wisteria. You dug up heritage bulbs to plant trendier annuals. And tonight, you tried to claim my life's work as your own to sell cheap trowels." I turned to David. He was pale, his mouth hanging open. "And you," I said, my voice softening just a fraction, but heavy with disappointment. "You let her. You watched her treat your mother like a servant in her own home. You let her steal my art. You let her banish me to a shed." "Mom, I—" David started, tears welling in his eyes. "The agreement is breached," I said firmly. "The lease is terminated. Immediately." I turned back to Tiffany. "Get off my stage. Get out of my garden. And take your brand with you." Tiffany looked at the crowd. No one was cheering. The investors were putting their checkbooks away. The magazine editors were taking frantic notes. This was a much better story than a garden launch. "You can't do this," Tiffany screamed, stomping her foot. "We have rights. We have squatters' rights." "Actually," I said, checking my watch, "you are guests, and guests can be asked to leave, especially when they are trespassing." I looked at Marcus. "Marcus, would you mind helping me escort these trespassers to the gate? I believe they have some packing to do." Marcus grinned. He hopped onto the stage. "It would be my honor, Eleanor." As Tiffany was led away, screaming threats about lawsuits and social media takedowns, I looked out at my garden. The lights twinkled. The jasmine smelled sweet. David stood alone at the bottom of the stairs. He looked small. "Mom," he whispered. "I didn't know." "You didn't ask," I said. "And that is the tragedy, David. You grew up in paradise, but you never learned to tend it." I turned my back on him. I had a party to finish. The silence after Tiffany's screaming faded was heavy, thick with the scent of expensive perfume and embarrassment. The guests, investors, influencers, editors, stood frozen, clutching their champagne flutes like lifelines. They were waiting for a cue. Should they leave? Should they applaud? Was this performance art? I didn't give them time to decide. I adjusted the microphone stand, wiping Tiffany's fingerprints off the chrome. "Now," I said, my voice calm, the voice of a woman who has stared down bulldozers. "If you are here for the Tiffany Garden collection, I'm afraid that brand has been composted. However, if you are interested in the actual history of these gardens, the wine cellar is open, and I believe the 1996 Cabernet pairs beautifully with humility." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Nervous at first, then genuine. Marcus Thorne raised his glass. "To Eleanor Vance," he shouted. To Eleanor, the crowd echoed. Just like that, the tide turned. They didn't care about Tiffany. They cared about power. And in that moment, standing in my dirty overalls with the deed in my hand, I was the most powerful person in the zip code. I spent the next hour holding court. I didn't change my clothes. In fact, the dirt on my knees became a badge of honor. I walked Marcus through the herb garden, explaining the medicinal properties of the foxglove. I showed a group of investors the irrigation system I had patented in the 90s. They listened rapt. David, meanwhile, had disappeared. I saw him retreat into the house, presumably to deal with the hurricane named Tiffany. At midnight, the last guest left. The caterers were packing up. I stood on the terrace alone. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, aching weariness. My joints hurt. My heart hurt. I walked into the house. It was quiet. Too quiet. I found David in the kitchen. He was sitting at the island, his head in his hands, a bottle of whiskey. My late husband's whiskey was open next to him. She left, he said without looking up. Tiffany. Yeah, she called an Uber. Said this environment was toxic. She went to a hotel. Smart girl, I said, pouring myself a glass of water. She knows a sinking ship when she sees one. David looked up. His eyes were red. Mom, why didn't you tell me about the designs, about everything? Tell you, I laughed, a harsh sound. David, you grew up watching me draw those plans. You played under that drafting table. You knew who I was. You just forgot. Or maybe you chose to forget, because it was easier to let Tiffany rewrite history than to stand up to her. She's my wife, Mom. I wanted to support her. Support is not synonymous with submission, David. You let her erase me. You let her treat me like a squatter in the home your father built for us. He flinched, I thought. I thought we were building something together. She said we were partners. She was a parasite, David, and you were the host. She didn't love the garden. She loved the content. She didn't love the house. She loved the address. I took a sip of water. The eviction stands. You have 30 days. Mom, please, where am I going to go? I put all my savings into her business. I'm broke. Then you better start digging, I said, because the only way you're staying on this property is if you earn it. As an employee. An employee. My head gardener retired last month. I need someone to mulch the north beds. It pays minimum wage plus room and board. The room is the potting shed. The board is whatever you can cook in the kitchenette. David stared at me. You want me to live in the shed, the one Tiffany tried to put you in. Poetic justice is the best kind of fertilizer, don't you think? He looked at his hands. Soft, manicured hands that hadn't held a shovel in years. Then he looked at me. He saw the steel in my spine. Okay, he whispered. Okay. The next morning, the war began in earnest. Tiffany didn't go quietly. Oh no, she went digital. I woke up to a phone call from Marcus. Eleanor, have you seen Instagram? I don't have Instagram, Marcus. I have a life. Well, you might want to get one. Tiffany posted a video. It's viral. She's crying. She says you're a monster. She claims you have dementia and that you attacked her. She's asking her followers to save the garden from the crazy granny. I sighed. Of course she is. She's also threatening to sue, Marcus continued, for emotional distress and breach of verbal contract. She says David promised her the house. Let her sue, I said. I have paperwork older than she is. But the internet mob is a different kind of pest. By noon, there were people parked at my gate. Fans, trolls. They threw eggs at my mailbox. They shouted, "Free Tiffany." I closed the blinds. I called my lawyer. And then I called the police. When the officers arrived, I met them at the gate. I showed them the deed. I showed them the videos from the security cameras. Cameras Tiffany didn't know about. They showed her kicking my dog, a sweet golden retriever named Buster. They showed her dumping bleach on my prize roses, because the color clashed with her outfit. This is vandalism, the officer said, grimacing at the footage. And animal cruelty. Charge her, I said. While the police dealt with the mob, I dealt with David. He was in the shed. He had moved his things, what little he had left, into the small dusty space. He was wearing an old pair of jeans and a t-shirt. Here, I said, tossing him a pair of gloves. The north beds, weeds first, then mulch, 3 inches deep. Don't bury the stems. He took the gloves. He didn't argue. He went to work. For 2 weeks he worked. He sweated. He blistered. He came to the back door of the main house for meals, which I served on paper plates. I didn't let him inside, not yet. Tiffany, meanwhile, was unraveling. The lawsuit she filed was dismissed in 3 days. My caretaker agreement was ironclad. The viral video backfired when Marcus published an article in his magazine titled, "The Fraud in the Flowers: How an Influencer Tried to Steal a Legend's Legacy." He included side-by-side photos of my original sketches and her photoshopped versions. The internet turned on her. The sponsors dropped her. Her brand withered faster than a tulip in a drought. One afternoon, 3 weeks later, I found David in the rose garden. He was on his knees, deadheading the blooms. He was doing it correctly. Cutting at the 5-leaflet set, facing outward. He didn't hear me approach. "You missed a spot," I said. He jumped. He wiped sweat from his forehead. He looked different. Stronger. Less like the boy in the linen suit. More like the man his father wanted him to be. "Mom," he said, I'm sorry about Buster. I saw the video." "He's fine," I said. "Dogs forgive, mothers take a little longer." "I know," he said. He looked at the roses. "I remember when you planted these. I was 10. You told me they were peace roses, named for the end of the war." "I did." "I forgot that," he said softly. "I forgot a lot of things. I got caught up in the image, Mom. Tiffany. She made everything look so shiny. I wanted to be shiny too." "Shine is cheap, David. Patina takes time. Character takes dirt." He nodded. "I'm done with shine. I like the dirt." "Good," I said, "because I have a proposition for you." He looked up. "A proposition?" "I'm turning the estate into a foundation," I said. "A public botanical garden. Classes for kids. Horticulture therapy for veterans. A living museum." "That sounds amazing." "I need a director," I said. "Someone to manage the grounds. Someone who knows the difference between a weed and a wildflower. Someone I can trust." "You want to hire me?" "Not you," I said. "Not the David who stood by while his wife mocked me. I want to hire the David who spent the last 3 weeks sweating in the mulch to earn his keep." Tears spilled over his cheeks. He didn't wipe them away. "I can be that David. I want to be that David." "Good," I said. "Probationary period is 6 months. You stay in the shed. You earn your way back into the main house. Deal." 6 months later, the Vance Botanical Gardens opened to the public. It was a crisp autumn day. The maples were blazing red. Tiffany tried to come. She showed up at the gate looking for a photo op, looking for a redemption arc. David was at the gate. He was wearing work boots and a polo shirt with the foundation logo. He looked her in the eye. "Ticket, please," he said. "David, it's me," she simpered. "I miss you. We can fix this." "Ticket is $20, he said. "Proceeds go to the anti-bullying initiative Mom started. Or you can leave." She left. I watched from the terrace. David walked back up the path, smiling. He waved at me. I waved back. My garden was safe. My legacy was secure. And my son, he had finally grown some roots. If you've ever had someone try to weed you out of your own life, leave a comment below with a sunflower emoji. I want to hear your story of reclaiming your ground. Did you stand tall like a sunflower, or did you have to use a few thorns like a rose? And if you enjoyed seeing a garden variety bully get exactly what she deserved, please hit that like button and subscribe to Family Shock. We plant seeds of truth here, and we water them with justice. To David, keep digging, son. The best treasures are always buried deep. And to Tiffany, well, I hear cacti are very trendy this year. Maybe try hugging one of those.